The moment you react emotionally, you have already surrendered authority. Not because emotion is wrong, but because unexamined emotion hands the steering wheel of your life to whatever provoked you. Most people never notice this loss of power. It happens quietly, in the pause between stimulus and impulse, when the mind rushes to defend, explain, attack, or escape. In that instant, you are no longer acting from choice. You are being pulled. Look closely at your own reactions, the tightening in the chest when someone challenges you, the rush of anxiety when the future refuses to give guarantees, the anger that flares when reality does not follow your expectations. These responses feel justified. They feel human. Yet what they reveal is dependence. Whoever can provoke your emotions can direct your behavior. Whoever controls your inner weather controls your actions. This is why reacting never makes you strong, no matter how intense it feels. Intensity is not power. Noise is not authority. The Stoics understood this with painful clarity. They saw that most suffering is not imposed from the outside, but volunteered from within. When you react, you announce to the world that your peace is conditional, that it can be taken from you by words, events, or imagined futures. This is not a call to suppress emotion or pretend indifference. It is an invitation to reclaim command, to stop living as a servant to every impression that knocks on your mind. What follows is not comfort, it is clarity. And clarity, once seen, cannot be unseen. Why reaction is mistaken for strength? Reaction feels powerful because it is fast. It gives the illusion of decisiveness. When emotion rises, the body floods with heat, tension, and urgency, and the mind mistakes this surge for authority. It feels like strength because it moves immediately, without hesitation. But what moves without reflection is not strength. It is impulse wearing the mask of confidence. Most people confuse intensity with power. A raised voice feels dominant. A sharp reply feels victorious. A visible emotional charge feels like presence. Yet none of this proves inner command. It only proves that something external has gained access to your nervous system. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that the faster a person reacts, the less sovereign they are over themselves. Seneca writes in Letters from a Stoic, letter 18, that uncontrolled emotion promises force but delivers weakness. He warns that passions rush ahead of judgment, dragging reason behind them like a captive. This is why reaction feels alive in the moment, but leaves regret afterward. It burns quickly, consumes energy, and leaves nothing solid behind. Strength, by contrast, is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not rush to prove anything. The crowd rewards reaction because it is easy to read. It is visible. It is dramatic. A reactive person gives constant signals. You know exactly where they stand, what they feel, and how they will respond. This transparency is mistaken for authenticity. In truth, it is predictability, and predictability is vulnerability. Whoever can predict you can provoke you. Whoever can provoke you can control the direction of your actions. The Stoic did not admire the person who felt the most, but the person who governed themselves the best. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 6, paragraph 8, that the mind becomes the color of its thoughts. A reactive mind is constantly recoloring itself according to external events. It has no stable center. It borrows its identity from whatever happens next. reaction also feels like self-defense. This is one of its most dangerous disguises. When you react, it feels as though you are protecting your dignity, your boundaries, your sense of self. But look closer. If your dignity can be threatened by words, if your worth can be shaken by circumstances, then it was never protected to begin with. True defense is internal. It does not require display, it requires grounding. There is another illusion at work. Reaction feels honest. People say, "This is just who I am, I speak my truth, I do not hold back." The Stoics would ask a harder question. If this is truly you, why does it change with every situation? Why are you calm in comfort and furious in resistance? Why confident when praised and shattered when ignored? A self that shifts this easily is not expressing truth. It is reacting to pressure. Epictetus teaches in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 1, that people are disturbed not by things, but by the judgments they form about things. Reaction skips this insight entirely. It treats judgment as fact. It obeys the first impression as if it were reality itself. In doing so, it abandons reason at the exact moment it is needed most. Strength, in Stoic terms, is not emotional silence. It is emotional order. It is the ability to feel without being driven, to notice anger without obeying it, to recognize fear without letting it steer. This capacity does not look impressive in a loud world. It looks slow. It looks reserved. It looks unimpressed. And that is precisely why it unsettles others. A reactive person is easy to influence. A composed person is difficult to move. This difference defines power more accurately than any display of force. When you do not react, you introduce uncertainty. Others do not know how to push you. They do not know which lever will work. Calm removes their advantage. The Stoics did not avoid emotion because they feared it. They avoided submission to it because they valued freedom. Reaction chains the mind to the moment. It locks you into what just happened, what was just said, what might happen next. Strength, by contrast, creates distance. And in that distance, choice returns. This is the first uncomfortable truth. Reaction is mistaken for strength because it feels active. But activity without command is noise. Power begins only when the mind pauses, assesses, and decides rather than obeys. And that pause, small as it seems, is where sovereignty begins. The Stoic reframe reaction as a transfer of control. Every reaction is a transaction. This is the frame most people never consider. They believe they are expressing themselves, defending their position, or responding naturally. In reality, they are handing something over: time, attention, emotional stability, authority over their own inner state. Reaction is not just an emotional event. It is a transfer of control from the self to whatever triggered it. The Stoics were uncompromising on this point. Epictetus states in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 20, that if you allow external things to disturb you, then you have given them power over you. This is not metaphor, it is mechanics. The moment your mood, behavior, or decisions are altered by something outside your reasoned judgment, authority has shifted away from you. Consider how this plays out in daily life. Someone insults you. Anger rises instantly. Your tone sharpens. Your body tightens. Your thoughts narrow. In that moment, the other person is no longer just speaking. They are steering. They have reached inside your nervous system and pulled a lever. You may believe you are standing your ground, but you are reacting on their terms, not yours. The same transfer happens with fear. News headlines provoke anxiety about the future. Your breath shortens. Your mind races ahead of reality, constructing scenarios that do not yet exist. Nothing concrete has happened, yet your peace is already gone. The future now owns your present. Imagination has replaced reason as the ruler of your attention. Reaction disguises itself as engagement with life, but it is closer to servitude. You are constantly responding to stimuli instead of acting from principle. The Stoics did not call this living. They called it being dragged. Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, paragraph 47, that a person who allows themselves to be disturbed by external events forgets that they are responsible for their own ruling faculty. The ruling faculty was sacred to the Stoics. It was the seat of freedom. What makes this especially dangerous is that reaction feels personal. It feels intimate. It feels like you. But look carefully. Does the reaction belong to you, or does it belong to the trigger? If a different person, a different comment, or a different situation produces a completely different version of you, then what you are experiencing is not identity. It is exposure. Stoicism teaches that nothing external has direct access to the soul. Access is granted through judgment. Reaction bypasses this gate. It accepts the first impression without inspection. It treats appearance as truth. Once that happens, the transfer is complete. You are no longer choosing how to relate to the event. The event is choosing for you. This is why reacting always weakens your position, even when it feels justified. You may win an argument and still lose command of yourself. You may feel right and still be ruled. Stoic strength was never about winning encounters. It was about remaining internally unconquered. The reframe is simple, but not easy. Before asking what you should say or do, ask who currently holds the reins. If your emotion is leading, you are following. If the external situation dictates your inner state, you are reacting. And if you are reacting, you have already paid the price, even if you do not see it yet. Power returns only when you interrupt the transaction, when you refuse to give immediate access to your inner world, when you create a pause long enough for reason to enter. In that pause, the external loses its leverage. The insult becomes sound. The uncertainty becomes possibility. The pressure becomes information, not command. This is the Stoic shift. Reaction is no longer viewed as a feeling to justify, but as a signal that control has been misplaced. Once you see it this way, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, reacting becomes less tempting, not because it is forbidden, but because you understand its cost. The dichotomy of control. Revisited, where attention decides power. Most people believe the Stoic dichotomy of control is about action, about deciding what you can change and what you must accept. This is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more precise and far more demanding. The dichotomy of control is not primarily about behavior. It is about where you place your attention. And wherever attention goes, power follows. You suffer less from what happens than from where your mind insists on living. The mind rushes ahead into outcomes, judgments, imagined consequences. It clings to what has not happened and resists what already has. Reaction is born in this misplacement of concern. The Stoics understood that pain intensifies not because events are severe, but because the mind refuses to remain where it has authority. Epictetus makes this explicit in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 2, Chapter 5, when he explains that some things are within our power and others are not, and that confusion arises when we treat the latter as if they belong to us. The mistake is not ignorance, it is attachment. Attention lingers where control does not exist, and frustration grows there. Consider how anxiety operates. The body reacts to a future that has not arrived. The heart races over possibilities, not facts. Reason is replaced by anticipation. The individual believes they are preparing, when in reality they are surrendering the present to a fiction. Attention has abandoned the only place where choice is possible, the current judgment of the mind. This is why reacting feels inevitable. The mind is already standing in the wrong place. When something happens, it strikes directly at concern that was misplaced long before the event. Reaction is not sudden. It is the result of prolonged mental absence from what is truly yours. The Stoic discipline is not to eliminate care, but to relocate it. Care belongs to intention, judgment, and character. It does not belong to outcomes, opinions of others, or the behavior of the world. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 12, Paragraph 1, that the mind has power over itself, not over external events, and that realizing this is the source of strength. When attention rests on what is not yours, emotion becomes chaotic. When attention rests on what is yours, emotion becomes manageable. The difference is not suppression. It is alignment. You do not force calm. Calm appears when the mind stops demanding jurisdiction where it has none. This reframing changes everything. The question is no longer how to control emotion, but why emotion was allowed to roam unattended in the first place. Reaction exposes that neglect. It shows where concern was invested without authority. The Stoic does not wait for life to become predictable. He becomes predictable to himself. His values do not shift with circumstance. His judgments do not collapse under pressure. This consistency is not rigidity. It is coherence. And coherence is what steadies the mind when chaos presents itself. When you understand the dichotomy of control in this way, reacting loses its urgency. The trigger still exists, but it no longer lands where it can cause damage. Attention has been withdrawn from the unstable ground and placed back into reason. In that moment, the mind regains its footing. This is the quiet work Stoicism demands. Not grand gestures, not visible discipline, but a continuous, almost invisible decision about where to stand mentally. Stand where you have authority, and reaction weakens. Stand where you do not, and reaction will always rule. Acceptance of fate, alignment instead of resistance. Most people hear the word acceptance and immediately think of defeat. They imagine passivity, resignation, giving up. The Stoics meant something entirely different. For them, acceptance of fate was not weakness, it was precision. It was the decision to stop wasting strength fighting what cannot be moved, so that strength could be fully applied where it matters. Resistance to reality feels like courage at first. The mind argues, protests, replays how things should have gone. Emotion rises in defense of expectation. Yet this resistance does not change events. It only creates friction between the mind and the world. and friction, sustained over time, becomes suffering. The Stoics saw suffering not as fate's cruelty, but as the cost of insisting that reality negotiate. Marcus Aurelius returns to this idea repeatedly. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, paragraph 23, he reminds himself to love what happens because it is woven into the fabric of his life by nature itself. This is not poetic comfort. It is strategic clarity. What has already occurred is no longer an opponent. Treating it as one only ensures exhaustion. Reaction is fueled by refusal. Refusal to accept an outcome. Refusal to accept uncertainty. Refusal to accept limits. The emotional surge that follows is the mind pushing against a door that will not open. Anger, anxiety, and resentment all share this structure. They are forms of protest against reality, and reality never yields. Acceptance, in Stoic terms, is not approval. It is acknowledgement. You do not say this is good. You say this is so. That distinction matters. The moment you acknowledge what is, without layering judgment on top of it, emotion begins to lose its leverage. Not because the situation changes, but because resistance dissolves. There is a hidden arrogance in constant reaction. The belief that events should conform to preference, that people should behave according to expectation, that life owes explanations. The Stoics dismantled this arrogance not with bitterness, but with humility toward nature. Epictetus states in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 12, that when we are upset by events, we forget to ask whether it was ever promised that things would unfold as we wished. Acceptance restores proportion. It places the self back into the larger order of things. You are no longer wrestling the universe. You are moving within it. This alignment does not remove pain, but it removes the extra suffering created by refusal. The event remains. The internal war ends. When fate is accepted, reaction loses urgency. There is nothing left to fight. The energy that once fueled protest becomes available for reasoned action. You stop asking why this happened to me and start asking what is required of me now. This shift is subtle, but it marks the return of agency. The Stoic did not believe fate excused inaction. He believed resistance wasted it. Acceptance clears the ground. It creates mental stillness from which deliberate action can arise. Without acceptance, every action is distorted by emotion. With acceptance, action becomes clean, proportionate, and effective. This is why acceptance looks calm. It is not because nothing is felt. It is because nothing is argued with unnecessarily. The mind no longer exhausts itself demanding a different past or a guaranteed future. It stands in the present, unburdened by impossible demands. When you stop resisting fate, you stop feeding reaction. Emotion may still appear, but it no longer governs. The mind has aligned itself with what is, and in that alignment, strength becomes quiet, stable, and difficult to shake. Reason and emotion, who holds the final authority? Emotion speaks first. It always has. It arrives uninvited, fast, persuasive, and urgent. It tells a convincing story about danger, injustice, loss, or desire. Most people assume that because emotion is immediate, it must be obeyed. The Stoics disagreed. They did not deny emotion. They denied it the right to command. Emotion is information, not instruction. It reports a sensation, a perception, a disturbance in the body. It does not tell you what must be done. That responsibility belongs to reason. When emotion is allowed to decide, action becomes reflex. When reason is allowed to judge, action becomes choice. The difference between the two defines whether a person is free or governed. Epictetus explains this distinction with precision in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 3, Chapter 8, where he teaches that impressions arrive automatically, but assent is voluntary. The impression says something is unbearable, insulting, threatening. Reason asks a quieter question. Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this within my command? Reaction skips this examination entirely. It treats the impression as a verdict. This is why reacting feels unavoidable. The mind has not been trained to pause between impression and response. Without that pause, emotion rushes directly into behavior. Anger becomes speech. Fear becomes avoidance. Desire becomes compulsion. The person believes they are being honest when in fact they are being led. Reason does not silence emotion by force. It does not argue loudly or suppress harshly. It interrogates calmly. It slows the moment down just enough for clarity to enter. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 7, Paragraph 16, that it is within our power to strip events of the judgments that disturb us. The event remains. The disturbance fades. This is the discipline most people avoid. It feels uncomfortable at first. Pausing feels like weakness in a culture addicted to immediacy. Silence feels like loss in a world that rewards response. Yet every moment you delay reaction, you reclaim authority. The nervous system settles. Perspective widens. The mind regains balance. When reason leads, emotion changes its role. Anger becomes a signal that a value feels threatened, not a command to attack. Fear becomes a signal of uncertainty, not a demand to retreat. Sadness becomes information about attachment, not a verdict on the future. Emotion is no longer the ruler. It becomes an advisor. The Stoics train this capacity deliberately, not by pretending to be calm, but by practicing judgment under pressure. Each pause strengthened the ruling faculty. Each refusal to react reinforced sovereignty. Over time, reason did not have to shout. Emotion learned its place. This is why Stoic strength appears effortless. It is not because emotion is absent. It is because authority is clear. The mind knows who decides. And when authority is clear internally, external events lose their power to provoke. The question is never whether emotion will arise. It will. The question is whether it will be obeyed. The answer to that question determines whether you live as a servant to impressions or as a steward of your own mind. What Stoic strength actually looks like. Strength is often imagined as visible force, loud certainty, immediate response, emotional intensity that leaves no doubt about where someone stands. The Stoics rejected this image entirely. To them, true strength was almost invisible. It did not announce itself. It did not hurry. It did not need to dominate the room to hold authority. Stoic strength is restraint, not the restraint of fear, but the restraint of clarity. It is the ability to feel pressure without leaking it outward, to receive provocation without returning it automatically, to remain unmoved not because you are numb, but because you are grounded. This kind of strength unsettles people because it offers nothing to grab onto. A reactive person sets the emotional temperature of every room they enter. Their mood spreads quickly. Their anger invites conflict. Their anxiety creates tension. A composed person does the opposite. They absorb disturbance without reflecting it back. Thus, atmosphere settles around them. Others feel it instinctively, even if they cannot explain it. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 11, paragraph 18, he reminds himself that the best way to avenge oneself is not to become like the offender. This is not moral superiority. It is strategic integrity. When you mirror another person's chaos, you multiply it. When you refuse to mirror it, you end the exchange. Silence after provocation is often misunderstood. People assume it means submission or lack of confidence. In reality, silence can be dominance. It denies the other person the reaction they expected. It disrupts their leverage. Without your emotional response, their influence collapses. Calm cannot be manipulated because it offers no handle. Stoic strength also appears in decision-making. The strong person does not rush to choose under pressure. They are willing to disappoint, to delay, to remain uncertain rather than act against reason. This patience is not indecision. It is respect for consequence. Seneca writes in Letters from a Stoic, letter 59, that nothing is more powerful than a mind that remains steady in prosperity and adversity alike. There is an internal dignity to this steadiness. It does not depend on approval. It does not fluctuate with praise or criticism. The Stoic is not indifferent to others, but he is not governed by them. His sense of self does not rise and fall with opinion. This makes him difficult to provoke and impossible to coerce emotionally. Strength of this kind is built privately. It is forged in moments no one sees. When you choose not to respond immediately, when you question your first impulse, when you allow discomfort to pass without acting on it. Each of these moments strengthens the ruling faculty. Over time, restraint becomes natural. The paradox is that this invisible strength is deeply felt by others. People trust the person who does not overreact. They respect the one who remains measured. They listen to the one who speaks only when necessary. Calm carries weight because it suggests depth. This is what Stoic strength looks like. Not aggression, not withdrawal, not coldness, but self-command. A quiet authority that does not need to prove itself. A presence that cannot be shaken because it is not dependent on external permission. The internal transformation from reacting to responding. The transformation the Stoics pointed toward was never behavioral. It was perceptual. The world does not become softer. People do not become kinder. Events do not slow down to accommodate your growth. What changes is the position from which you interpret everything that happens. And that change alters everything. When you react, the mind experiences life as something happening to you. Events arrive as intrusions. Words feel like attacks. Uncertainty feels like threat. The self becomes a target moving through a hostile environment. This posture drains energy because it requires constant defense. Responding, by contrast, begins from a different premise. Life is not happening to you. It is happening, and you are choosing how to meet it. This shift is subtle but decisive. Reaction collapses time. It traps you in the immediate sensation. Responding expands time. It creates space between impression and action. In that space, reason steps forward. You are no longer pushed. You are positioned. Epictetus makes this distinction clear in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 28, when he explains that freedom is not the absence of constraint. but the ability to consent or refuse internally. The external situation remains unchanged. What changes is whether it is granted authority over your inner life. Responding does not mean becoming slow or passive. It means becoming deliberate. You still act. You still speak. You still set boundaries. But the action arises from judgment, not reflex. The tone changes. The energy changes. You are no longer broadcasting emotion. You are transmitting intention. This is why responding feels calmer, even in conflict. There is no internal argument, no justification running in the background, no urgency to prove anything. You know why you are acting, and you accept the consequences before you move. Reaction seeks relief. Response seeks alignment. The internal transformation is not dramatic. There is no moment when emotion disappears. There is a moment when emotion stops deciding. Fear may arise, but it no longer dictates retreat. Anger may appear, but it no longer demands expression. Desire may surface, but it no longer commands pursuit. Emotion remains present, but power has shifted. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 5, paragraph 16, that the ruling mind can preserve its tranquility by refusing to add opinions to what is merely happening. This refusal is the core of transformation. You stop narrating reality as an enemy. You stop treating discomfort as injustice. You stop interpreting sensation as instruction. Over time, this changes your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who is easily shaken. You begin to trust your capacity to endure without reacting. That trust becomes stability. Stability becomes confidence. And confidence, unlike bravado, does not need reinforcement. The world notices this change before you do. People sense when they cannot pull you off center. Conversations shift. Conflicts shorten. Manipulation loses effectiveness. Not because you have hardened, but because you have clarified where authority lives. This is the quiet revolution Stoicism offers. You do not control events. You control your relationship to them. You do not silence emotion. You relocate its role. And in doing so, you move from a life of reaction to a life of response. The Stoic truth: freedom begins where reaction ends. Reacting makes you look weak for a reason that goes deeper than appearance. It reveals that your inner world is open to invasion, that your peace can be negotiated, that your behavior can be redirected by pressure, provocation, or uncertainty. This is not a moral failure. It is a misunderstanding of where freedom actually lives. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised sovereignty. They taught that a person is free not when life becomes gentle, but when the mind no longer submits automatically to what happens. Reacting is submission. Responding is command. One places you beneath events, the other places you alongside them. Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 2, paragraph 1, that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. A reactive soul is constantly recoloring itself according to circumstance. Calm one moment, agitated the next. Confident when praised, wounded when challenged. This instability is exhausting. It keeps the self in motion without direction. Stoic freedom begins with a refusal. Not a loud refusal, but a quiet one. The refusal to treat every impression as urgent. The refusal to obey the first emotional impulse. The refusal to believe that feeling strongly means acting immediately. This refusal creates space, and in that space, strength takes root. Not reacting does not make you cold. It makes you clear. It allows you to choose your battles instead of being dragged into them. It allows you to conserve energy instead of dispersing it across every disturbance. It allows you to live from principle rather than from provocation. Seneca reminds us in Letters from a Stoic, letter 37, that the greatest power a person can possess is mastery over themselves. This mastery is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is revealed in restraint, in patience, in the ability to remain steady when others are frantic. When reaction ends, something unexpected happens. You do not become passive. You become precise. Your words carry more weight because they are not fueled by impulse. Your actions become more effective because they are not distorted by emotion. Your presence becomes grounding because it is not seeking validation. Freedom is not the absence of pressure. It is the absence of compulsion. Pressure will always exist. Uncertainty will always appear. Provocation will always find you. The Stoic does not eliminate these forces. He denies them authority. This is the Stoic truth at the heart of everything you have heard. Strength is composure. Power is choice. And freedom begins at the exact moment you stop reacting and start deciding who you will be, regardless of what the world presents. The quiet authority of a ruled mind. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when a person realizes that most of their fatigue does not come from effort, but from internal disorder, from constant reaction, from living on alert, from allowing every situation to demand an emotional response. The Stoics recognized this exhaustion as a symptom of misplaced authority. Too many things were allowed to decide who you became in each moment. Reacting fragments the self. One version of you appears in anger, another in fear, another in desire, another in regret. None of them last. None of them are chosen. They arrive, rule briefly, then vanish, leaving confusion behind. This is why a reactive life feels unstable. There is no center, only movement. Stoicism offers something radical in its simplicity. One ruler, one faculty in command, the mind trained to judge before it obeys. When this order is restored, life does not become easier, but it becomes coherent. You recognize yourself across situations. You trust your responses because they are yours, not borrowed from impulse. Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 10, Paragraph 12, that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke. This statement is not optimism. It is responsibility. It places freedom exactly where it belongs, inside the act of judgment. The Stoic truth is demanding because it removes excuses. You can no longer blame people for your loss of control. You can no longer blame circumstances for your inner chaos. You are asked to govern yourself fully without appeal. This responsibility is heavy at first. Then it becomes liberating. When you stop reacting, you stop advertising weakness. You stop signaling that your peace is conditional. You stop inviting others to manage your emotions for you. The world senses this shift, not consciously, but instinctively. A person who is not easily moved becomes a reference point. Others adjust around them. This does not make you distant. It makes you present. You listen more clearly because you are not preparing your reaction. You speak more precisely because you are not discharging emotion. You act with intention because you are not escaping discomfort. Calm becomes your default, not because nothing happens, but because nothing unnecessary is added. Finally, Stoic strength is not about appearing invulnerable. It is about being internally ordered, about knowing what belongs to you and guarding it with discipline, about meeting life as it is without surrendering your sovereignty. Reaction ends where responsibility begins, and responsibility, once accepted, becomes freedom.